So will making is an area that most people don't know a lot about because you only do it once every few years, and many
Yeah.
people, as you have so rightly pointed out, don't even have one yet. So give us a lowdown on what's the historical context of will making and how has it changed?
Okay, watch the broad smile on my face now. Um, the basic practice around will making has not changed in hundreds of years.
Mm,
So, ignoring technology, ignoring the internet, ignoring modern communications, etc., is fundamental to how wills are made today. So, in order to have a valid will in Australia, which applies in most developed countries and a bunch of developing countries as well, it's very common around the world, is a will has to be on paper, end of. It has to be in writing. It has to have your wet signature. By wet signature, I mean in ink. And it has to have the signatures of two independent witnesses in your presence who confirm that you are signing it. Now, of course, it has to detail what you're leaving to whom and who's going to administer the will after your passing. But if you think about it, I can give you a million stories about the guy who
mm,
made a will in 1799 using the exact same regulations as we do today. And while there is probably change coming down the track due to the pandemic and the obvious weaknesses that came along, today I've got to do the exact same to make my will, to put it on paper, to sign it in the presence of two witnesses, as my equivalent would have done in 1799 or 1899 or 1999. So, of course, legislation changes, and correctly so, but the purpose of the real objective of what I'm doing is
mm.
nothing to do with the legislation improvement, which allows for provision for families and children and spouses and de facto partners, all of which are reflected in the law around wills. But the practice says it's got to be on paper. It's
Right.
got to have a wet signature. You can sell the building that you're sitting in for $100 million and no two human beings will meet, no paper will be exchanged, title will transfer electronically, etc. But
Mm.
if you want to make a will, it's got to be on paper and it's got to have a wet signature in the presence of two other human beings, which during a pandemic has proven to be a little bit problematical.
Right. And so, we talked about COVID, obviously, and the impact of will making on that. So, what are the other factors that will influence, it sounds like, much needed change in this area?
Yeah, look, there are two fundamental factors here. One is you could call it ground up. The other is kind of from the top down. The reason that you and I have spoken about this is in Will HQ, I and we are determined to change the mindset of people that says that do not put off your will. That's a mindset change, and it's a very simple type change. It's not easy, but it's simple. And I always kind of use those two adjectives um, to describe this. Top down means that legislation from the federal to the state governments have to actually change to allow electronic signatures, electronic witnessing, electronic wills, and all around that. So I'm convinced that change is coming. I'm not a lawyer. I'm someone who believes in solving problems using technology. And I believe in reaching people and getting into their heads and asking them the simple question: do you believe you should have a will?
Mm,
And if you believe you should have a will, do you believe you should do it now? And if
mm.
the answers to both of those questions are yes, and you know, think for 99% of people, we all want to look after our families and loved ones. I want to provide a solution that simplifies and makes inexpensive the making and management of wills. Now, you correctly said that most people also have the mindset that people will make a will and then put it in their bottom drawer. And when they eventually leave this world, their family or their executor will pull out that will and everything will go smoothly. But that doesn't take into account the fact that circumstances change throughout life. So every time one, um, starts superannuation, starts a job, buys a property, sells a property, gets married, God forbid, but gets divorced, has a child, has another child. Those children reach the age of 18. You have superannuation, you've got retirement, you're buying a business. I can go on with 30 plus prompts that people should take to review and update their wills, which means that if, for the sake of stupidity, you take someone who starts a will at the age of 30 and dies at the age of 90, that's 60 years. That will should probably be updated 10, 15, 20 times. Traditionally, that's going to cost 10, 15, 20 grand. We can do that whole thing for buttons in comparison, you know, for dollars over a lifetime instead of tens of thousands of dollars. And that's really the message we want to get across.